Now we're going to talk to an interesting guest that is an activist on criminal justice reform. Her name is Chandra Bozelko, and she joins us now. Thank you for appearing on Rebel Headquarters. We appreciate it.
Hi, Cenk. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So you are a fascinating story here. You've won 8 different awards, both for activism and in media. And you were magna cum laude graduate from Princeton University and was getting you were in the middle of getting postgraduate work when you were arrested.
Yes.
And you served 6 years?
More than 6 years. Yeah, more than 6 years.
Wow. So let's start there before we get into your great work on criminal justice reform.
Okay.
What in the world happened there?
I'm still trying to answer that question myself, Cenk. I would say for the listeners right now or people who are watching, it's probably the most accessible explanation is a combination of white privilege, family dysfunction, and a misunderstanding of how pernicious the criminal justice system is for most people in this country. I really never thought when I was arrested that this would end up the way that it did, with my serving more than 6 years in a maximum security facility. So it's different. When white people get arrested, they think that everything will work out fine. When people of color get arrested, they actually know that something might go wrong. And I never knew that until it did.
And so you served there, you're out now. So has the case been resolved or no?
I still have, you're a lawyer, Cenk, so you know, I still have some habeas petitions pending alleging ineffective assistance of counsel because my lawyers were doozies, to say the least, the way they represented me, and they were highly paid attorneys. So if that happened to me, you can only imagine what happens to people who can't afford counsel. So yes, there is still some trail of post-conviction review going on, but it's not much, and it's really hard to overturn a conviction in this country, much harder than anyone really ever expects.
So you wrote a book of poetry while incarcerated called Up the River, an anthology.
Yep.
And then you started a newspaper column from inside prison, which is unique to say the least.
Yes.
So tell us about the column. How did you think about that? How did you get someone to agree to run it? Give us the context there.
I actually didn't expect anyone to run anything that I would have written. I was just so angry at what I was witnessing in the system, and also not just the prison where I was, which is the only state women's prison in Connecticut, but in Connecticut at large. I was incarcerated during the time of the Cheshire murder trials. I don't know if you remember, there was a big case. It got nationwide attention in 2007 when a doctor's family was killed by 2 people who had been recently released from prison. This sent off shockwaves within the criminal justice system in Connecticut. Everyone who was on parole was then pulled back in. I was actually caught up in that wave when I first entered into severe overcrowding. So I started to pay a lot more attention, not to just what was happening within my prison, but within all of the prisons in Connecticut and what was happening to other people's cases. And that was a very notorious case here in Connecticut. So I got very angry and I wrote a column about how the 2 people who were being tried for the Cheshire murders had severe histories of abuse. And it was their trial was happening at the same time as the Jerry Sandusky scandal was breaking down at Penn State. And I tried to compare the victims of Jerry Sandusky and these 2 people who were being tried for murder, because technically they were both in the same status. At one point, they were both very severely abused young men. So I sent it out to the New Haven Independent, which is a local newspaper, and they ran it. And then from there, it got some traction, and then they asked me to send more to them. So that's how Prison Diaries, which is the column name, got started.
Yes, and Prison Diaries won the 2018 Webby Award for People's Voice for Personal Blog or Website. And like I said, I mean, you won so many different awards at this point. So let's talk about some of your work. So you helped convince Texas Governor Greg Abbott to reverse the state's refusal to comply with the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So right there, that's already a great life's work. But talk to me about how you did that. He's a very right-wing Republican governor. I don't know why anyone would be against prison rape elimination, but there are right-wingers who are opposed to it. So
there are actually 2 states that still refuse to comply with that act. So it's not as easy as you would think. But I actually had no intention of convincing the governor at the time. I just wrote an op-ed about my own personal experience within the prison where I was, and then the New York Times ran it. He read it. actually Senator John Cornyn got very upset and wrote a letter to the editor, firing back at me. And then from there, they just relied on the op-ed. Excuse me, my bud fell out. Relied on the op-ed to realize that what they were doing was wrong. That prison rape has become kind of what I called cultural wallpaper. It's just kind of this joke. It's expected when really it's absolutely nothing that should be tolerated at all at any time.
Yeah, it's you don't know this, but that's one of the issues that I am stunned by and mentioned on the show quite often. That we're like, oh, prison rape, as if like that's a normal thing and we should be accustomed to it. No, that's rape. And why is that a common occurrence in our prisons? That's monstrous. And people treat it like it's no big deal. So why was John Cornyn upset about your column?
I think his first of all, they were being essentially accused, and I was accusing all states that were failing to comply with the act, with not caring about the people within their correctional facilities, and also not caring about the people who are outside of the correctional facilities, since the cost of prison rape, when you add it in and calculate out recidivism and the other costs of it, is billions of dollars. So this isn't actually just a cheap problem and that we can laugh about and make jokes about, about dropping the soap, that kind of thing. This is a very serious societal problem. The way we treat people inside is very important. We have to make sure that people's human rights are protected, but people on the outside have a right to have their tax dollars spent in a way that's actually useful and not harming other people. So Senator Cornyn got very upset and said we're trying to comply, and he made the argument that the reason why Texas wasn't going to comply was that there was a gender issue with staffing, and that is one of the requirements of the act, but that's still not enough to allow people to keep being harmed.
It's such a sad commentary on the status of our country that we have to convince people to be against rape because it costs too much money.
Yeah, I mean, just the recent story about Michael Cohen possibly being arrested for any affiliation with the president. Prison rape jokes have already jumped out already, and people have actually given real serious commentary that Mr. Cohen is fearful of being sexually assaulted in prison. If it's that much of a risk, then obviously we shouldn't be sending as many people inside, or really any people inside, to this risk at all.
So to give people a sense of context, there's almost as many men raped in the country as women, because of the astounding number of prison rapes. So that's unbelievable. And so, all right, one more thing that's really important that I wanna get to about your story. You spent 75 days in total in solitary confinement over the 6 years.
I did.
So I wanted to talk to somebody who spent time in solitary confinement. I think it is a brutal way of treating people, but you experienced it. So how does it feel when you're in solitary for an extended period of time?
Well, the UN, the United Nations, calls it torture, and I can't disagree with them since I've been in there. The longest stint that I spent in solitary confinement was 30 days. So that was enough really to make me question reality. Also, what was the worst for me was the lack of ability to bathe. So you can take possibly 3 showers a week, but if you're out of the facility, like I was, very often going to court for appeals and other things, if you missed a shower day, then you didn't get to shower. That, like you would only shower twice a week, and you'd have to even when you showered, you have to put the same dirty clothes back on. So for me, from what I had read and researched about the Holocaust, this is what Nazis did to people who were held in concentration camps, is kept them feeling really dirty. And then when they announced that they would go to a quote unquote shower, which is really the gas chamber, they were actually willing and ready and excited to go to what was ultimately their death. And I just kept thinking about that while I was inside, is that the how we use people's bodies against them. And because that's what was happening to me at that time.
No, it's definitely torture, and humans are social animals, and everyone that has studied it considers it torture. And we do it so regularly to so many people that are in prisons, even if they're in there for nonviolent offenses. It is grotesque. There's so much to reform in the criminal justice system. So it's last question, and of course we don't have time for all of this, but Chandra, what's your sense of the biggest things to tackle in criminal justice reform right now?
That's really hard to say, because at least the national trend is going towards reentry. I know the White House is championing the First Step Act, which would get people, some people in the federal system out a little bit earlier, and it would change some of the programming that they can get. But I think the biggest challenge that we're facing right now is having people understand that it's not okay to do just anything to someone just because you have perceived that they've broken a rule. This is what's happening in the immigration problem that we're facing right now. This is what happens in criminal justice. The idea is that if someone has transgressed or sinned or stepped over a line, then anything goes. We can take their freedom, we can take their family, we can take anything that they have, their human dignity, their cleanliness, anything, and it's okay because they've broken a rule. And I think we need to get out of that kind of punitive mindset. That's what's really driving us down the wrong road. But that's probably the most important and also the hardest thing to do.
So that's actually really, really powerful, and I'm glad that you said that, and that's going to stay with me. I want everybody to check out prison-diaries.com and justice-rocks.com. Chandra Bozelko, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Thanks.